I graduated summa cum laude. I stood on the podium with tears in my eyes, diploma in one hand and years of sacrifice behind every step I took. But when I turned to look for my parents in the crowd, their seats were empty. Again. They were too busy flying to New York to celebrate my brother Ryan's latest promotion, assistant vice president at some firm he got into through Dad's golfing buddy. While I was defending a 300-page thesis on socio-political ethics, they were posting selfies at a rooftop bar, writing captions like, "So proud of our golden boy." When I texted to let them know I was graduating top of my class, Mom replied, "That's nice, but don't be upset if Ryan's news overshadows things. He's doing real work now." Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments, Friome, where are you watching this video? I remember the lump in my throat as my friends posed for pictures with proud, tearful families. I stood alone, smiling politely while strangers congratulated me. The woman from the registrar's office gave me a hug. She asked, "Where's your family?" I shrugged and joked, "Busy." Ryan got promoted. This wasn't new. Ryan had always been the achiever, while I was the one with opinions. He played sports. I painted murals. He did internships Dad arranged. I worked 3 jobs to pay for textbooks. Every milestone I crossed was invisible next to Ryan's LinkedIn updates. When I got accepted into a prestigious grad school in the UK with a partial scholarship, Mom sighed and said, "So you're still chasing the academic dream? When will you get a real job like Ryan?" Dad added, "Degrees don't mean much if you can't monetize them." I was stunned into silence. No congratulations, no pride, just financial comparison and passive insults. They said I'd end up poor, living off theory while Ryan climbed the corporate ladder. The message was clear. No matter how hard I worked, I would never be enough because I wasn't Ryan. When I finally landed a role as a consultant for an international NGO, helping shape policies in war-affected zones, they laughed and called it volunteer play. Mom quipped, "Let us know when you stop backpacking and start earning like your brother." What they didn't know was that I was working closely with governments. My research was being published in journals. I was being invited to speak at global summits. I was building connections, quietly, globally, and with power players they couldn't pronounce. One day, I came home for the holidays and overheard Dad telling his friends at dinner, "Yeah, our daughter's into humanitarian stuff. No idea what that means. Ryan, though, he just signed a deal that'll double his department's profit. We raised a true professional." I sat in the kitchen like a ghost, listening to them talk about me like I was the family disappointment. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. So I left early, and I got back to work. And soon, the world started noticing. 2 years after that Christmas dinner where I'd sat in the kitchen listening to my father call me irrelevant, I stood on a glass stage in Geneva, addressing leaders from 7 countries. I was no longer the girl who cried behind closed doors. I was Dr. Noelle Carter, lead policy strategist for Global Equity International. That same night, a feature article with my face on the cover of World Affairs Monthly ran with the headline, "The Young Voice Changing the Way Nations Think." And beneath it, a single line that made me smile wider than anything Ryan had ever accomplished. Consultant Noelle Carter was once told her degree would mean nothing. They didn't know. My family didn't even know where I lived anymore. I'd cut them off after the last time my mother called me too emotional to survive in the real world. And yet, they still found ways to message me. On holidays, on Ryan's birthdays, on their anniversary. Not to check in, just to update me on Ryan's latest milestone. Every email was like a press release from the Ryan Corporation. Ryan just bought a new condo. Ryan got invited to speak at a banking summit. Ryan's wife is pregnant. No, how are you? No, are you safe overseas? And I let it be. I smiled politely at the silence, because silence was no longer emptiness. It was my boundary, and it was growing louder. I bought my first apartment in London, then a penthouse. Then I was hired by a high-profile venture fund that wanted to invest in sustainable development. One of the senior partners? Mr. Miles Bennett, a man I'd met in passing years ago at a summit. He remembered my speech, said it stuck with him more than any CEO's pitch. Over lunch, he asked if I knew a man named Ryan Carter. My breath caught for a second. "He's my brother," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Miles laughed. "He interviewed at our firm last year. We passed. Talented, but too focused on ladder climbing. No real sense of impact." I said nothing, just sipped my coffee. "But inside? Oh!" the silence screamed. 1 month later, I received a folder marked URGENT, New Hire Approval. At the top of the list, Senior Advisor, Corporate Strategy Carter Ryan. He was trying again, this time desperate to make the jump from regional to international. I closed the folder and waited. 3 weeks later, I walked into the boardroom and approved every name on the hiring list, except his. That same afternoon, my assistant forwarded me an email from my mother. Subject line, "Help your brother?" She'd found out. "He really needs this, sweetheart. You know how important this is to your father. Can't you just help for once? You've always been the sensitive one." I didn't reply. Instead, I quietly called Human Resources and asked if the final rejection letter had gone out. It had. I asked to add one personal line at the end. Sometimes degrees do matter. The next time I heard from my family was a month later. They weren't angry. They were polite. Overly polite. "We're so proud of how far you've come. Why don't you visit us sometime? Maybe you can talk to Ryan? He's been having a hard time." But I was done giving what they never gave me. I had stopped asking for love in a house that only knew performance. Then came the moment I didn't expect. My firm acquired a smaller consultancy, a shell company struggling with lawsuits and poor leadership. When I looked at the list of shareholders, my jaw clenched. My father. He had invested nearly his entire retirement fund in this firm after Ryan pitched him the idea. They were sinking, and they didn't know the buyer was me. I sent them both the same email. "Dear Mr. Carter, this message is to inform you that your company has been acquired by Global Equity International. Please be advised your current position will be dissolved within 30 days. No signature, no kindness, and for the first time in their lives, my parents had to sit with silence. Not mine, but their own. The consequence of years spent turning their daughter into a ghost in her own home. I wasn't cruel. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. I just existed, louder than their expectations, softer than their control, and far, far beyond their reach. It was Ryan's daughter's christening. I only knew because my mother forwarded me the invitation, not even directly. Just CC'd like a forgotten afterthought. In her message, she wrote, "We'd love to see you, but don't feel obligated. After all, it's mostly family." Mostly family. As if I hadn't been born from her own body. As if I hadn't once scrubbed the kitchen floor after Ryan's graduation party while she praised him for being the golden boy of our bloodline. I didn't reply, but this time I didn't ignore it either. I sent a package instead. Inside was a small ivory envelope, on the front, "To whom it may concern." It arrived the morning of the christening, delivered by a suited courier, just as the guests began to pour into the decorated garden. My father was pouring champagne, my mother adjusting the floral centerpieces. Ryan stood with his arm around his wife, basking in the applause of relatives. The moment the envelope was opened, the celebration fell silent. Inside was a formal document, one line bolded at the top. "Effective immediately, the mortgage on 218 Crescent Hill Lane has been transferred to new ownership. Please direct all future payments to Dr. Noelle Carter." Below it, stapled, was a second sheet, an eviction notice. And at the bottom, a personalized RSVP card. "Regretfully, I cannot attend the christening. I will, however, be stopping by the property next Friday to inspect my investment. Please make sure the keys are on the counter." That evening, my phone rang. Again. And again. My mother left 6 voicemails. My father texted. Even Ryan tried calling me, his name lighting up my screen like a ghost I'd buried years ago. But I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. Out of peace. Because revenge wasn't about screaming louder than the people who once silenced you. It was about standing so tall they couldn't reach you anymore. 1 week later, I walked through the house I was once told I'd never be good enough to inherit. The same house where I'd heard my parents say, "Ryan's our real success story." The same house where my degree had been mocked, my dreams dismissed. Now, every room echoed with something new: ownership. As I walked through the hallway where family portraits once hung, photos I was always missing from, I paused. I reached into my bag and pulled out a framed piece I'd had made months ago. It was my college diploma, signed, sealed, and mounted beneath a tiny plaque that read, "Most likely to fail." I hung it right above the mantel. Then I locked the door behind me, not out of spite, out of finality. Because the little girl who once begged for a seat at the table had grown into the woman who now owned the table, the chairs, and the roof above it. And she wasn't handing out invitations anymore. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments freedom, where are you watching this video?